very excited to be welcoming Beate Steller to our podcast series. Beate has always loved art, even as a small child, and she nearly pursued a career in it. Instead, she went into nursing and then social work. But she always kept dabbling in art until a decade ago when her mother died. She found herself naturally drawn back to art as a way to heal her loss and to come to terms with so many changes in her life. Now she uses art in her counselling work and with older people in aged care and palliative care. Beate brings over 30 years of experience in a variety of industries to her role as a principal training and development consultant. Beate also currently works as a spiritual care team leader in aged and palliative care. She's been an adult educator since 1992 for organisations including the Centre for Community Welfare Training, the Australian College of Applied Psychology, the Professional Development People, and Lifeline Sydney, and we're pleased to say Sydney Centre for Creative Change. In the last 10 years, Beate has specialised in grief and loss education and counselling, transition counselling, and applied mindfulness. She has been a board member of NALAG, the National Association for Loss and Grief, since 2009. Beate has both graduate and postgraduate qualifications in adult education, social work, and nursing, and holds a certificate in assessment and workplace training. Beate is currently completing her second master's degree in ageing and pastoral studies. She continues to work with people from Indigenous and culturally diverse backgrounds. She holds professional membership with the Australian Association of Social Workers, the New South Wales Health Services Profession, and Spiritual Care Australia. Beate started her own inner work over 3 decades ago with yoga and Vipassana and walked the Camino in Spain in 2015. On a personal note, I think Beate is one of the most compassionate and kind educators and people I know, and we're very proud that she's presenting the Art of Grieving workshop in May in Sydney. I'd like to welcome Beate. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Jackie. It's my pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in using art to help others in the various ways that you're doing that at the moment?
Look, as you said, I've always loved art, and in fact, when I finished school, I really wanted to study art, but I couldn't see myself as an art teacher in school. So, as I said, I ended up doing nursing. But you know, when I think about that question, it was actually in the psych ward when I was doing my training. This is in the 1980s. A lot of patients were doodling and doing artwork, but in a I suppose, structured way, just to help them settle and I suppose even to fill in a lot of time in those wards, those psych wards. And because I loved art, I always found that was a really great way to link. In fact, I still have some of the artwork that patients gave to me as a gift from years ago, and I think even then it was sort of like I wouldn't even know that was called a therapeutic art type of thing, but in fact that's what was happening as I look back. Even the little doodling, in fact, now we talk about mindful drawing and things like that, was actually a way to help them to settle when they had anxiety and strong feelings and experiences coming up for them. But it was a very intuitive thing that people did. And as I said, most people probably didn't take any note of it, but I did because I loved it and I could see the difference it made. So in a strange way, I wouldn't have even thought about this before, but I guess I've always been attracted to art and have sort of taken that sort of forward in my working life over many years now in a variety of ways. Yeah.
For those who don't know much about art as therapy or art in therapy, how would you define or describe that, particularly in the roles that you're currently in aged, in palliative care and in counselling work?
Look, it's really a process, a creative process that helps. It has really a therapeutic function and a benefit. So it's like when words aren't able to express what people are feeling, another medium like art, music, writing, suddenly poetry says much more than what words in counselling could express. And also, I suppose, so art, in terms of art therapy, it's a creative process that helps people to say something, that express something that's very difficult for them. And I suppose in loss and grief, in the grieving process, often we're stuck for words. We can't even don't know where to begin, how to express ourselves. So I found it, I see it so often in people, that if you ask them to find, make a collage or something that about that person that they've lost, or about a life or a country that they have to leave, suddenly the conversation changes tremendously, and it opens up a whole new language. So I see it as a creative process that sort of allows for that expression. I suppose it allows them for clients to express themselves in a way that is beyond words. And you know, when you look out throughout history, art in galleries and in the community, it says so much when you really start to look at it. And there's always a story behind it, and usually a very powerful story of change, and a lot of loss and grief, obviously, in many of these stories. And so the other thing, I suppose, when I think about art therapy, the big thing that I stress is that you don't need to have a creative abilities. You don't have to be a fantastic drawer. I'm certainly not one myself, but you have to be able to be free enough to express yourself and have the courage to do so. And of course, it's seen as a tool for expression, not a diagnostic tool as well. So that's what I really stress in my training, you know, and that it's the person who's producing or is creating, it's their story, whatever they want to say with their story. And the lovely thing is, people tend to find themselves expressing things they didn't think they would say. But if the story needs to be expressed, it will come out usually in the art. They can't sort of cognitively, or like logically hold it back, but it will come out through a symbol or through a bit of something they've drawn or painted. And I've always found, this is what I find so fascinating about this work, is that people get so surprised themselves in terms of what the process has given them. So it's nothing that I can do, but that they have found themselves through the opportunity to express themselves creatively if they are going through a difficult time.
I think a lot of people would appreciate that that art can be a great expressive medium, and I think most people would associate perhaps children using it or using it with even teenagers. But you're talking about older people, you're talking about people who might be migrants or refugees, also people dealing with big loss issues in their lives as adults. Yes. If it is the case that people don't necessarily need technical skill to be able to use art as therapy, yes, but you said what is important is a sense of freedom to be able to bring a fluidity to the work. How do you reconcile that with adults who are in a space of grief, of loss, of personal difficult, life transition? What do you do as a therapist to help free people up to be able to use art to help themselves?
Look, for example, one lady that I've been working with, she's in her 90s now, and she's been in our care. Let me call her Dot for the sake of it's not her real name. She was very angry about this transition into care and really had massive adjustment issues, and was very angry about the whole thing. And we talked about it for a long time. Now, she was also a very creative person, and one day when she was talking about this anger, I said to her, what would the anger look like if you did a drawing of it? And she said, I love to do it. So we got pens and paper and colours out, and I just sat with her quietly, and she just went wild, just putting out all this expression of this anger. And it opened up a wonderful conversation about shapes and colours and things that were important to her. And in the end, after she had expressed it, I asked her, what would you like to do with this piece of art and this anger? And we talked it through, and she ended up burning it. So with my presence, we had a little ritual. We even burned this piece of art. So if you imagine I'm in an aged care facility, we had to sort of discreetly go in the garden and burn it. And we got the ashes, and we sort of hid them in the garden and nourished the ground with this ashes. And she spoke about a great relief and of this expression of her feelings. Now, it didn't mean that anger went away altogether, but it helped her a lot just to lift that and to get more clarity. And, this lady has quite advanced dementia now, but she still remembers that incident and we still talk about it. Also, like this lady loved the bush and nature, so she loves stones. So we often, when we talk about art therapy, it's not just colour and water and paper or whatever. It can be any artistic expression or creative expression, I should say. So sometimes we go to, I've been to this place where she loves in the park, national park. So I brought her some stones back and she just will hold them and we do a little mindful observation of the stones and holding them and feeling them. And then she will sometimes then write about it, or I'll write it. She can't write anymore because of her hands, but she's got really bad arthritis, but she can tell me the words and I write it down, and she writes a little bit of poetry, which is something that's triggered through the connection of holding the stone, and it releases some sort of creativity in her, and she really loves it. And let me tell you, it's incredibly rich experience for myself being present, being part of that. So that's just one example. So in aged care, and as I said, with dementia, it's in particular very powerful, and there's been a lot of research done on dementia and art therapy because when your ability to string your words together neatly and logically is disappearing, there's something very liberating in the art and pictures and images that speaks to them on a very deep level. Yeah.
Do you think it works equally well with everybody, or do you think there are some client groups that it wouldn't work so well with?
Oh, everyone. Look, I'm in my private practice as a social worker. I work with a lady whose mother had died and she was just finding it so difficult to adjust, and we spent a lot of time talking about it, reminiscing, and she was grieving and crying. And then I thought, we'll do a bit of an art exercise, and where she did a drawing of what her relationship, what her life was like before her mother died and then after, and how she would like it to be. And I didn't know what she would come up with. You always take a bit of a risk when you introduce something creative like that. And every time I've used it, but particularly with this lady, she knew exactly what it was. And this lady, her future view of her relationship with her mother and everything else gave her so much hope and so much courage to move forward in her grief that we would have never have been able to have come through to by just discussing it, because she had the answer inside her really. And it was like, and it was just stick figures and things that she drew. It was nothing fancy, but she had an image inside her that came out, and it actually gave her sort of hope type of thing. So that's just a recent example I had, but it just really touched me because as I said, you don't know what they might say, oh, that's a waste of time, or, but every time I've done anything creative with a client or resident, they always feel nourished through the process. Yeah.
Can I ask, it doesn't sound then necessarily like you're doing these art creative processes with all of the clients that you work with or all of the residents. What is it in you that makes you think that this might work? It's a risk that you take, yeah. But what helps you make that decision to take that risk with some of your clients?
Look, it's usually when I know there's something quite significant there and they're a bit stuck in getting the words out, or we've been going over and over something for a long time, and like this lady with Dot, over and over again, and it'll be the same conversation all the time. And I just thought, I thought I'd try this. Part of me thought, well, maybe this is a bit of a circuit breaker and maybe that will give a bit of new clarity and direction. Well, it was very profound, actually. So it's usually, I have usually art things around me, so I can just quickly pick up the resources, and you don't need much actually to do that sort of thing. But it's more, and I don't actually go in and say, today we're going to do art and here we go, but I will say to my clients, I will say to them, right from the start, I'm always keen to use all sorts of types of practice and creative practices. And so if they're interested, I will introduce it, but it's up to them. They don't have to do it. So I've usually flagged that in the beginning, and then usually maybe we'll talk for a few sessions, and then suddenly today is the day, So it's a little bit spontaneous actually, and it's very intuitive in some ways, and I have to be very switched on and really open to where they're at. I found at times when I've been a little bit too gung-ho and say, here, we've got the art box and we're going to do that, it doesn't work.
No.
And so I have to be really sensitive to where people are at. And if I wait and if I can be patient, usually it always works really well.
With over 30 years experience in the industry, you are an incredibly experienced clinician. What would you say is important to you about the therapeutic relationship? And for those who perhaps are a little bit less experienced but are wanting to use more art in their work, what are some of the elements in that you're looking for that you think help facilitate the therapeutic relationship that gives it the scope to then take some of these risks and try new things?
Look, I've thought about this a lot before, and I thought a lot has to do actually with me, that I am centered in myself, that I'm calm, and that I'm open to listen and to be open to all sorts of processes. And I need to be fearless about using creative processes like art. So I think a lot has to do with my openness to it in the first place and my confidence in using it. And I have to say, the confidence does grow as you use it more because of the feedback you get from your clients and residents and people, your consumers, because they will say, that was the best thing I've ever done. And you think, like it's, I didn't know there was going to be like that. So, but I think a lot has to do with, I suppose, a bit of a humility, therapeutic humility, to know that I don't know whether, I'll say to people always, look, I'm not sure what will happen with this, but I feel we should try, this could be a good thing to try if you're willing. So, and also saying that you don't know sometimes how it's going to go. So I think that's part of that, I suppose, in terms of a therapeutic presence. It has that humility, and I think also being open to creativity for myself personally. I've used, as you mentioned, when my mother died, therapeutic art became really quite an essential part for my grief journey, and that certainly has really enabled me to use this in my work, and it's really prompted me actually to do this, and I found it actually sort of in myself. I didn't have anyone to guide me, so I thought, well, if I can do that just by myself, I'm sure it's actually very intuitive, basic sort of processes. So you don't have to be a massive trained 4-year degree therapist in this area, but I think you have to have confidence, but also humility, and be really present.
That must have been a huge challenge, losing your mother. And I'm wondering, in addition to that, have there been other challenges or setbacks for you professionally along this journey to where you are now?
Yes, look, I guess working in health in an institution sometimes it's quite difficult, because to be creative, there's a lot of legislation and things, you can only do certain things in hospitals and in aged care. So in some ways, in terms of setbacks, there were a few little setbacks where I've tried to be creative, and there maybe wasn't as an organisation sort of welcomed in a big way, but I've had to really, I've kept going and pushed through with it, and people I sort of know that I'm a bit like that. I'm a little bit out of the box, a bit different, and in terms of my approach, and they can actually see the difference it's making for our clients and residents, and so therefore I think that's a good thing. I'm using technology much more now in my work, in my engagement with people, in my counselling. I suppose you could say that's a type of artistic process, where we just pick up images. I have an iPad with me the whole time, to find images to connect people with what's meaningful. I would have never thought I would ever do that, but I guess I'm constantly growing in this. So that's I suppose the setbacks have challenged me, but I feel I need to keep going and stay.
I believe you might have won an award for some of that work recently. Is that right?
Well, I've published a book actually in technology, and it's called Tech to Connect, Staying fully connected in aged care. And so it's using actually Skyping and all sorts of processes like that to stay connected with loved ones. So for example, we just had last Saturday a wedding of one of our residents' grandson got married, and so we actually Skype it, but also we invite all the other residents to this beautiful wedding celebration with a high tea, afternoon tea, and we work towards it, you know, in terms of the conversations for the day and then after that. And this lady, she, you know, had been quite self-isolating herself, and you know, and she would hardly come out of the room, but through the coming out and the wedding, coming up meaning to join the other residents, I haven't seen her smile so much for a long time. And it's just been wonderful to use technology, and she was really there at the wedding of her grandsons and her family's wedding. So that's, I suppose, another creative process, something that was a loss for her, that she couldn't be part of that celebration because she wasn't physically able to. But she was actually there, and she saw everything. And that brought everyone great joy, actually, you know, not just for her, but for so many others.
Yeah, that's a wonderful opportunity you've created. Amazing. That's wonderful. In the work that you have done, I guess for yourself and for others in using art or creative processes, what do you think are the most important lessons you've learned?
Always listen to the client, listen to the resident. It's their creation, and be totally led by them. Don't assume anything, don't judge anything, but go with a spirit of curiosity and interest. And that actually is the greatest thing, just someone to be really curious about their expression, whatever they've created in their art. You know, people say they really appreciated that most of all, actually, that the interest, you know, and without any sort of agenda, so to speak. Yeah, so I think that's really important. The non-judgment, of course, and really emphasizing that it's not about the standard of art, or that it's art for the art's sake. It's simply the process that matters. In fact, I was at the art gallery, New South Wales Art Gallery, the other day, and they have a section on Aboriginal art, and they very clearly said that Aboriginal art was always just for process, for ritual, and as soon as the ritual was over, they would destroy it, because it was never about to be there as something you look at and keep, and it's simply a tool for the process. And I found that so wonderful, because they knew from thousand years back that there was a process through the creations, through an artistic expression, you know, a creative expression. And I found that very affirming, actually, in terms of that. Yeah.
It is incredible to have the resonance of what we're doing, I guess, reinforced by some of these ancient cultures.
Yes.
And I guess those who have gone before us. Are there particular mentors who you think have influenced your work in the field or inspired you?
Look, probably there's lots of people who inspire me. You know, I have supervision, and I've been very lucky. I've got very good supervision, but also I've got friends who are artists, and I love actually, and they, I suppose, express their own life through their art. But so from them, I see what they're doing and their creativity, and it excites me to use it more with my clients as well, I guess, you know. So yes, but I you know what, it's my clients often who are my mentors, you know, just by the way they actually apply it, and what I learned through their process, that actually teaches me so much. You know, every interaction, I think, wow, you know, I've learned something here, and that takes me forward, you know, with another situation. Yeah.
Thanks, that's lovely. If somebody was listening to this interview and wanted some specific guidelines about how to get started, or 3 top tips that you could give them, what would they be about using art in therapy?
Okay. First of all, I think have courage. Let that perfectionist, that critic, just go, because it's not about that. Then I think you need to also value and nurture your own creativity, you know, whatever it is, find your own outlet, because so you're nurturing that while you're encouraging other people to do it. And also just jump in and have a go. You know, I think there's, you know, I remember the first time when I started doing it, I was quite afraid. thinking, you know, I'm not sure whether this is going to work out at all. And learn also more about creative using art therapy, you know, as the courses that you run at the Sydney Centre of Creative Change, and read books about it. And in fact, many people write about their own art and what it's done, you know, so for them in terms of their own healing, especially in terms of loss and grief. So there's a lot of evidence around too that helps in that process. But I think you've got to nurture your own creativity as well. To be aware how important it is.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you, Beate. It's been wonderful speaking with you today, and I hope that if people want to know more about your wonderful work, they can come along to the Art of Grieving workshop that you run for us, and wish you well in all your wonderful ventures and your ongoing study.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Thank you.
Beate.